Welcome to another episode of Slamfire. Be sure to go to slamfiremedia.com. We got all our episodes posted on there. We have links to YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. And if you're not sure what, because the way that we have them labeled, let me just show you guys. Just go to slamfire.com just so you guys can see what it looks like. Slamfiremedia.com. There we go. Oh, let me show you guys what we're looking at here. So you go to slamfiremedia.com, nothing crazy, it's just simple slamfiremedia.com. Because these are the little thumbnails that we have for our videos. It doesn't really tell you much, but what's cool is we put a little description right here of kind of gives you a little snippet of what the episode is actually about. So you guys can go on there and read whichever one you're interested in, something that's a topic that you preference. You know, this is a good one right here, buy a gun. I really like making this this one right here. I'm going to continue a little bit on that today, just as a little teaser. But you have all the links right here, so you can just go if you prefer YouTube, Rumble, or BitChute. That's all right there, and you got a little description right here. So the website's really useful if you guys are looking for a little bit more info on the actual episodes themselves. So getting on with it, remember slamfiremedia.com. You guys can check that out. So what are we talking about today? So uh, I've been kind of having this thought in my head for a little bit, and when I did episode 14, we kind of talked about it of buying something to protect yourself, right? Because ultimately it is your protection, it is your responsibility to protect you and your family, depending on your role in your family, right? If you are the provider, the main provider of the family, ultimately sometimes in various cases, there are people who are responsible for other people, right? And that's just depends on your certain circumstance, right? Everyone's circumstance is different. We talked about this before, right? That's why freedom is so important. That you need to give someone the ability to choose for themselves, because every person's situation is completely different, right? They have different needs. So I kind of want to stem off of that, right? Going off of those responsibilities and things like that, and kind of dip my toes into the whole police state type of thing, where should should we be for police, against police, in the middle? And it's probably usually just like everything else, we need to kind of be in the middle. I do believe police is important. I don't think we should be defunding the police in the sense that we need less police, but I do believe that there is an issue going on with there is a potential for an issue, and there have been issues with policing in the United States. Like, for those of you, I'm willing to bet. I don't have real good analytics to know where a lot of our views are coming from, but I'm willing to bet the majority of us are in the United States. And if you're not in the United States, just to give you an idea, the United States is a country of laws. That's why a lot of things are kind of are the way they are in the United States. I don't know any other way to say it. We have a lot of regulations, we have a lot of laws. You can't just really do whatever you want. There are standards. Like, we are free in the sense that there is no one hindering us from reaching our ultimate goal of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are really no limits to that, right? There are laws that are put in place that protect people from being discriminated against, right? But that ultimately means that we are a country of laws. There are laws that we need to follow, and there are people ultimately that are required to enforce those laws, right? And that's where we come in with police and law enforcement. So talking about that, I believe it's a double-edged sword. I don't plan on this getting too long. I don't want to go too heavily into this without someone here to give me a counter argument. But just to give you guys what I'm talking about. So when we did episode 14 of going out and taking control of your life and being responsible, putting your safety, the responsibility of your safety into your own hands, talking about all that kind of leads to this whole police situation. Is it the police's should it be the police's responsibility to take care of you? Ultimately, should we be relying on police? Should we be giving so much power to the police? And I want to say yes and no. I want to say yes and no. I'm very much in the middle on this, and I hate it. I hate being in the middle on stuff. I would kind of like, my dream is to have a hill that I die on. I wish I could just like have a hill that I die on. Well, I kind of do. Like I believe in the Second Amendment, in that my belief is that whatever the government has, I should have the right to get as well. Whatever the government is able to supply to their soldiers, I should be able, as a United States citizen, I should have the right to get that same thing, right? There shouldn't be a restriction on me to get something that the government has, that the government uses to fight its wars somewhere else or whatever. If I can afford it, I should be able to get it. That's kind of where I stand. That's what I believe in the Second Amendment. That'd be my little hill. It's nice to have a little hill to sit on there and be like, come and try and knock me down. I'm just gonna stay right here. I am not gonna move. That's what I truly believe. If the government can issue out grenade launchers, if the government can issue out uh, fully automatic squad assault weapons, like I should be able to purchase that myself without any sort of like crazy, weird, unattainable certification type of thing. Like you need some sort of crazy special license that you can only get through a special sort of loophole or something like that. Like no, I'm a United States citizen. I am I am legally allowed to own a weapon. I should be able to have the same thing that the government is able to use against me, right? I should be able to get that. I think that is an infringement on my right to deny me a certain weapon just because I'm a citizen. I should have the same thing that the government has. I should have access to that. If I'm legally allowed to, I should have access to that. Right? That opens up debate, but that's just what I think. Okay? I could be totally wrong. So that leads me on to the whole policing thing. And I think I had a conversation about this with the Slanted Scholar before, where we talked about how I believe it was an anarchy episode. We talked a little bit about anarchy, where ultimately, if we get to a situation, say there were no police, say we outlawed police or whatever, however you want to say it, like hypothetical, that there was no more police anywhere, people just kind of had to fend for themselves, right? Where it was just like kind of anarchy type of thing going on, and there's no one there to help you. You need to help yourself, and it's everyone out for themselves, not out for themselves, but everyone's responsible for their own well-being, and just leave it at that. I think eventually it will lead to some sort of policing being required, because there are people who just don't have the resources to protect themselves. There are people who don't have the resources or the ability to provide for themselves, right? They're going to need help from somebody. So what are they going to do? They're going to probably hire somebody. And then they hire one person, someone's going to take that job, and then they're going to create a business, a company, or whatever you want to call it, a security. They'll become a contractor, and they'll be contracted out, and they'll hire employees, and then eventually it gets so big and so big. What do you have? A police station, pretty much, right? A police company, whatever you want to call it, right? So eventually it kind of leads to that, because people don't have time to be enforcing laws, right? We have jobs that we need to go to, we have responsibilities that we need to attend, we have kids, we have lives outside of the law, right? So when regular people are not around to enforce that law, we need someone there to do it while we're out doing what we need to do. So we pay taxes. Those taxes go and fund law enforcement. They fund all these public services, and we basically hire people to do those things that we don't have time to do, right? That we just don't have time, the experience, we're not able to do that. Like society wouldn't progress if we didn't have these public services. So I think eventually, if even if you got rid of them, we would lead to having that. We would in turn create a system that provides those services, because that's just the natural order of things, right? That's what I think what would happen. So I think policing is very important, but it needs to be like a local type of thing. When you have these city police, when you have these these policemen who are when you have people who are appointed rather than elected, that's when you start getting issues. So like sheriffs are very, very important to the communities. I think sheriffs are a good example of what policing should look like, because a sheriff doesn't just become a sheriff because someone told him that he's going to be a sheriff. Like he just didn't get promoted by someone. He was elected, right? So people usually vote for sheriffs because they're part of the community and they're going to be fair on the community, right? And usually people that are running for sheriffs, for the most part, these people care about the communities that they're in. I've known a couple of sheriff deputies, and I know a couple of guys that I worked with when I was in EMS and radiology, and when I went to college. There's some people that I know, and they're from the community. They legit have an interest in the betterment of their community because their families live there. They have generations of families living in that community, and they have a legit uh, uh, tie to that area that they want to protect, right? They want to protect it with their life, and they really feel like they can contribute to the betterment of their community. And I think that that's very, very important, and I think that that's the way policing should go. I think we're starting to run into problems when you have cops who just go in and just they don't really care where they don't really care where they're working. They're just kind of there to collect a paycheck, and they're treating it like a job. That's where I kind of feel like we start running into issues, because then you get into those things where they pull people over or they enforce laws unjustly, because to them it's like, well, what does it matter to me? This doesn't affect me. This isn't my community. I don't care about these people. These people don't know me, and I don't know them. So there's no tie there. So you run into these unique situations, these very I can't think of the word, but it's very unfair, unjust situations where there there should be a certain type of leniency applied, but it's not applied because at the end of the day, the cop is just looking to better themselves. They're not trying to better their community. I'm not trying to bash on cops, but there are cops that are like that. We have seen there are examples of this. Now, I think the majority of cops, the majority of policemen and women and law enforcement are out there because they want to be there and they can do the job. They can handle that high stress, and they want to be in that situation because they know they'll handle it correctly, or at least they'll do their very best to handle it in accordance to the law and constitution as best they can, right? Their intention is well. I think that that's the majority of law enforcement in the United States, but you do have those bad apples. It does happen. So to give you an example of why I think, first I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example of why I think the majority of policing, at least in general, right, just doesn't have to be in the United States, just policing in general, uh, the people who enforce these laws, any sort of law person, they want to do what's right according to ethics, right? They want to do what's correct. They don't want to treat people unjust. For the most part, they want to do things that are morally and ethically correct. So, for example, let me pull this up. If you guys haven't heard or seen yet, we have the protest, all of the what's it called? The convoy. My goodness, I just had a blank, just fart in my brain. It's like crazy. I just couldn't think of it. The Freedom Convoy, right? The trucker Freedom Convoy that's going on in Canada. It's insane. It's really, really. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. I think this is what people. This is a proper reaction to blatant hypocrisy and blatant violation of human rights and government overstepping its bounds. I believe this is a proper reaction, right? Other people think differently, whatever. I don't care. But look at this. Like, this is all jammed up. This is crazy. So this article talks about how a police chief basically is concerned about these blockade. Because look, I mean, and I was thinking about this too. Like, if these truckers are blocking up these roads, they have to be creating some sort of uh, like traffic jams and impeding on people's right to travel, right? Because they're just parked in the middle of the road. Look at this. You can't drive through there. You can't do anything. You just gotta walk, or you just gotta go back the way that you came. You can't get through this. So they have to be violating some sort of laws. But yet, look, all these cars are still here. I don't see any policemen. Maybe there are some people getting arrested, getting fined, or getting issued citations or something like that. But I really haven't heard any too many news articles about it, because I feel as if the cops look at this and they say, hey, these people are upset. These people are trying to exercise their freedom of speech, and we're going to allow them to do that. They're going to use their discretion to say, hey, these people are trying to prove a point. They're doing it peacefully, right? They're just parked there. They're not really hurting anybody. I mean, you can make the argument and say, well, what if there's a hospital on this other side over here and the ambulance can't get from here to here, you know? But I haven't heard any reports of anything like that. So I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but I'm pretty sure if that was happening, it would be plastered all over the news to try to shut this down. I think they would use any sort of ammunition they can get to shut this down, and using little articles like that, like, oh, Freedom Convoy stopped the gunshot victim from getting to the hospital on time, and they ended up killing them. So these people basically allowed someone to die. They got in the way of someone getting help, right? That would be a good article to put out in protest against this convoy, right? And this article, this is from the Washington Post. If you guys don't see it, Democracy Dies in Darkness. That's awesome. The Washington Post. So it's very, yeah, never mind. So right here, protest against, right here, the way that it is portrayed. The city is under siege, said slowly. This is a threat to our democracy. There's a nationwide insurrection. This is madness. So this is being very much portrayed as something that's bad, right? This is wrong. This shouldn't be done. This is the police chief. So why aren't these people getting arrested? Tow trucks getting why aren't these tow trucks coming and towing all of these vehicles away? I mean, first of all, it's just way too many, right? I don't think they would be able to do anything about it. Even if they could, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it, even if they tried, right? There's just way too many people, way too many vehicles, and ultimately they know that these people are helping people. I saw videos, and I've seen screenshots and photos of these people feeding the community, leaving out free food, like, hey, come get some food. They're giving out free clothing, and they're helping out the homeless. They're feeding the homeless. They're providing as much shelter and as much aid as they can to the communities that they're protesting in. And it's like, how you cannot portray it in a bad way when you see someone setting up a table and giving out free hot dogs and free food and free nourishment to the community around them. Like, how do you portray that in a bad way? You just can't, right? So there's really nothing that they can do about it. And I mean, I think that's awesome. So this is my example of that. I believe that there are policemen and law enforcement who care about the community and legitimately don't see this as a threat, right? But on the flip side, we have stories. We have stories that exist. I tried to look it up. I really couldn't look it up, but I'm sure if I dug around a little bit, I'd be able to find it. So, Timcast, Tim Pool. You guys, we talk about Tim Pool a lot, but Tim Pool had this idea made me think of the example that I heard on Tim Pool when he had what's his name? Oh man, I got it pulled up here. Brandon Tatum. He was a police officer. I got it pulled up right here. I'll show you guys the video. Right here, Brandon Tatum. He's a big YouTuber. He's got like millions of subs, I think. And I used to watch his stuff. He does like breakdowns of like shootings and different things that are happening within law enforcement. I want to say he was definitely a cop. He was a former LEO, and he wrote a book about it. And I want to say he was like in SWAT too. He was a member of Special Weapons and Tactics team, and he was up there. Like he knows his stuff. He's been in the business, right? He knows what it's like to walk a beat. He knows what it's like to be a cop in the United States, right? He's got that experience. On Timcast, they gave him. He's very much pro police, right? He's very much pro police, and he has that insight, which is very, very useful. So on Timcast, they explain to him a situation where, let's play it. I'm gonna play it. I really don't like to play these videos, but if that'd be awesome if Timcast or Tim Pool uh, try to shut me down over this 2 minute segment. I'm just gonna show you 2 minutes of a story. It's a crazy story of something that happened with a normal everyday citizen and the police. So you guys can hear what I'm talking about. So this is leading to the argument that there are police that are good, and that was with the Freedom Convoy. Now I'm going to talk about and show you evidence of how cops can be bad, how it can be wrong. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself and we can just listen to the story.
There was a really big story in New York that Luke was covered and interviewed the guy. The Supreme Court, I think it was right. The Supreme Court actually said the cops have no obligation to enforce the law.
That's not, but that's not applied on the street level. That's applied.
Well, it's a choice.
No, that's applied when you have to challenge these things in the court of law. That's not applied on the street.
Well, my friend Joe Lozito was attacked by a serial murderer who was on a killing spree. He was able to stop him. Police officers were watching the whole time, standing by, looking as the whole thing happened. The police officers knew that there was a serial killer on the loose. They saw him attack, kill people. They saw him stabbing people. Police officers with firearms, with batons, 2 of them, decided to stand behind and hide and not be seen as Joe Lozito, a man who is a hero, who stopped a mass murderer. He used techniques that he saw on the UFC, took him down, disabled his knife after being stabbed in the head, almost losing his life. And after that, only after the knife was thrown away, after this killer was finally subdued, then the police officers came out, put handcuffs on him, and they waited a long time. Joe Lozito almost bled out because of that long wait. And then on the national news, they had police officers save man from serial killer, calling him a victim, which was an utter disgrace. Joe Lozito sued the police officer, said, "How am I a victim when I stopped this guy and these cops were just watching, sitting there on their hands, not doing anything?"
Who was considered the victim?
Joe Lozito, the guy who took him down, the guy who almost lost his life, the guy who almost bled out because the police officers were waiting to get backup, even though they had him subdued and handcuffed. And Joe Lozito sued the NYPD, saying, you besmirched my name, you lied about me, you didn't help me, you were watching me getting stabbed. And the police officers argued, we have no duty to protect and serve you. And the court in New York upheld that ruling.
Are those officers still on duty?
Yeah, they were promoted by Mayor Michael Bloomberg. So they were seen as heroes by the corporate media.
Right. This is one thing I'll have to do. I can't speak to that. That sounds like the craziest thing I've ever heard. I've never heard of a case like that. Now, I'll take your word for it. I had to look it up.
No, I did a whole video about this. I'll let you even talk to Joe Lozito if you want to.
Right. I would have to watch it and go through before I can make a comment. I have never in my life saw a police officer or even heard of a police officer in any of the connective agencies that we've been a part of, we train with, that will ever use that as a measuring stick of how they enforce law or how they participate in saving and protecting people.
So crazy story, right? Crazy story. I really like that exchange though. Like that guy Luke and Brandon Tatum, like it could have gone heated, right? Because he started like raising his voice, getting upset. Like you could tell they're getting upset, but it's like a very good conversation that they were having. And the conversation actually goes on. I know I just showed one side of it or whatever, but that's the point is that there are officers out there willing to use their discretion to either turn a blind eye or to enforce laws that really are not hurting anyone. So there's another example that I've heard them use. I couldn't find the video clip of it, but it was an example, and I looked it up too. It was a woman who lived in Pennsylvania, and she drove to Atlantic City, which is in, I want to double check. Where is it? Atlantic City, because I don't want to get it wrong. I want to double check. So right here, Atlantic City is in New Jersey. So if you guys don't know, New Jersey has very strict gun laws. Very, very strict gun laws, okay? Pennsylvania is a little bit more on the lax side. And I want to say that this lady, she lived in, I don't know where she lived exactly, but she lived in Pennsylvania, and she wanted to drive to Atlantic City to go to the casinos or something, right? She had a weapon on her, which she had a license for. I think she had a concealed carry license and everything like that, and she was allowed to have that. But once she drove into New Jersey or Atlantic City, or no, it was, I think it happened in New Jersey. Once she drove into New Jersey, she actually got pulled over, and she ended up being arrested for having that firearm on her, because she wasn't allowed to have a firearm on her in New Jersey. In Pennsylvania, the law is different, right? She could have had that. She was legally allowed to have that in Pennsylvania, but once she just went over that line into the state, into New Jersey, then that's it. That law doesn't apply to her anymore, and she's now breaking the law in New Jersey. Did she intentionally do that? Did she did she do that with saying like, oh, I'm gonna go in there and I don't care if I'm breaking the law. I'm gonna take my gun wherever I want and this and that. It's like, I don't think she did. I think she was just something that, because when people carry, it becomes a part of them. It becomes a part of their everyday routine. It's just like, it's like putting your keys in your pocket, right? Putting your wallet in your pocket. You know, if you have like a habit, something you always carry with you, like a flashlight or a multi-tool, it's just like anything else. You don't think about it. It's just a part of you, right? Because that's all it is. It's basically a tool, something that you have and you use it if you need it. It just becomes a part of you, like anything else would be, as you get prepared for the day. So the cop that pulled her over could have used discretion and could have said, you're not allowed to have this here, or like he could have done a multitude of things that could have been in the best interest to serve the person that they were enforcing the law on, but they didn't. They arrested this woman. You know, I'm going to look up the news articles so that you guys just don't think I'm making stuff up. I forgot how I worded it. Woman who was arrested in New Jersey for gun possession. Yeah, there we go. They actually pardoned her recently. So, right here. Back in 2014. So, a woman with a Pennsylvania, where was she? She was from Philadelphia, yes. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Where was I? So, woman with a handgun permit faces prison for carrying in New Jersey. So, right here. She was 27. She obtained a license to carry and purchased a weapon, and during a trip, she was arrested and following a routine traffic stop, charged with unlawful possession. And they have restrictions on the type of ammo that you can have too. She told the police officer she had a firearm, which was the right thing to do. You always want to, whenever you're pulled over, you always want to let the police officers know, like, hey, I'm armed for your and my safety. I just want to let you know that I am carrying a firearm, just to keep everybody safe. So she did what was supposed to be right. And now she was facing a 3-year term just for having a firearm on her. So it was, and again, Atlantic County prosecutors' office declined to comment. Of course they did, because they know that they overstepped. They know that they went too far with that, right? And that's where the negative side comes in to policing, where you have these situations where that there are police who are very willing to go leaps and bounds just to get you arrested. Like the whole thing with like marijuana. I have kind of mixed feelings about marijuana, in that yes, it is illegal. I get it. Should it be legal? Should it be illegal? I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about that too, because I'm a little bit biased in the sense that I live in a community, I live in a place where there is a lot of traffic, so a lot of revenue that is feeding cartels in Mexico comes from the distribution and the transportation of marijuana. So I'm not against marijuana in the sense that I think it's bad for people. People shouldn't be smoking. I'm against it for different reasons, which I think takes me out of the conversation. Because I'm against it because I don't like that it funds the cartels in Mexico. So that's a little bit off the side, but if a police pulls over someone for having a small amount of marijuana, I don't think their lives should be ruined just for having a little bit of marijuana on them. I mean, it's ultimately, if they're impaired, okay, now we're talking something different. If you have marijuana that's in a baggie, you don't have any evidence that it was consumed. The person is capable of driving. They don't look like they're impaired in any way. I think the person should be written a ticket and it be confiscated and you move on, right? That's because it is against the law, but I don't think a person should lose their whole like life pretty much for marijuana. I like that a lot of places are making it misdemeanors. That's really helping. That's really helping out. I think that helps out a lot in the sense where you don't have people going to like going to prison, going to the big house for something that is really not hurting anybody. Again, now there are lines. I understand that if you are impaired and you're driving, that's something completely different, right? That's something completely different, and that should be dealt with appropriately. But when you're not hurting anybody, when you're doing something that could potentially make someone else feel uncomfortable, if you're ultimately not breaking any laws, you should be left alone. But there are police, there are law enforcement who are willing to overstep their bounds because reasons, right? If they're on, I don't know, maybe their parents didn't love them when they were younger. Maybe they're on some sort of power trip. I don't know. Whatever the reason may be, you do have opportunity. There is opportunity for policemen to kind of get out of hand and kind of go rogue and be very be a detriment, be a blight on their community rather than a symbol of justice, a symbol of peace, right? Because they're there to protect and to serve, right? To keep the peace, to serve their local communities. Whereas you have policemen and other law enforcement that are willing to take advantage of that for their own personal gain, right? A lot of corruption, and again, I'm still like kind of in the middle, but I feel as if like sheriffs and people who are elected, that would really help out mitigate. That would help mitigate a lot of those issues, I think, because like I talked about before, these policemen, these city cops, they're kind of just there for their job, right? They're there because that's where the work is, right? Where if you have sheriffs, these people campaign, right? These people campaign and they go out to the community and say, hey, vote for me to be sheriff. I want to be sheriff. I have, they basically interview for the position, right? And they need to be voted in. So those people are more inclined to do right by the community, to do right by the citizens, because they want to get elected the next year, right? They don't want to be out of a job next year. They want to be elected and they want to continue to serve. It is possible for a sheriff to become corrupted, yes, but they can always be voted out, right? So there is like that checks and balances, whereas police officers, there's not too many checks and balances. I've heard stories of cops that are involved in ridiculous shootings where it was completely unjustified, and circumstances where cops were abusing their power and nothing happens to them. They just get transferred over to another district, to another county or whatever, and they keep on doing what they're doing because they're not held to account, right? They're not elected, they're appointed, right? So they just move them around somewhere else and they're able to continue what they're doing, and it's not right. So I really think that would be kind of a good middle ground where you have some sort of checks and balances on these police, and having the sheriffs is really a really good foundation, because you have those checks and balances where if you don't like the way, if there's accusations of this, accusations of that, that can be investigated and the sheriff can be voted out, right? That's our checks and balances. We can vote them out. That would be his term limits, right? Everybody has term limits. We just have to vote them out to get rid of those term limits. That's another thing too. Like how a lot of these people talk about these politicians and say, we need to start invoking term limits. We need to get term limits in there. We're tired of this, like of these career politicians and this and that, blah, blah. And I was thinking about this earlier too. Like, I think we already have term limits. It's called voting, right? These people are not just getting the job that they're not just reapplying for the job and just getting the job. They're being voted in like year after year. So I think we have a lack of common sense problem rather than a term limits problem, right? And that's another episode that I would probably like to talk about, how we have too much of a reliance on news articles and influencers and technology and all of this junk, rather than just using our own brains to think about stuff. That's a topic for another time, discussion for another time. Wow, I think that actually makes sense. I was going to say something wrong. That actually makes sense. But yeah, those term limits would really help with the policing, because these cops, these sheriffs, they want to be elected the next year, so that they want to make sure they do a good job, so that they are elected the following year, or however long their terms are, right? I don't remember. I want to say it's yearly or annually, or every 2 years. I don't remember exactly. I will need to double check on that. But either way, the concept is still the same. I do believe that, again, same thing. I do believe that there are a lot of cops who are out there because they want to do good. They want to serve the community. They want to uphold the Constitution. But with that being said, of course there are going to be people who take advantage of their power and use it to benefit themselves or benefit someone else or benefit some sort of agenda, right? That is going to happen. I think that just happens. That's just part of society. But I'll tell you what mitigates all of this, what throws all of this out the window. If you are able to think for yourself, if you are able to provide for yourself, to handle things yourself, whether it be you handle them emotionally, physically, however you want to define handling a situation. If you are able to put a handle on your ego, a lot of these issues with policing and things like that, a lot of these things would not be needed. Policing would not be needed as much as it is, because you're able to think for yourself. You're able to go through conflict resolution, think rationally, and ultimately you would not need to call anybody, right? You would have the common sense to think defensively, is the way that I'm thinking. So don't put yourself in a situation. I mean, there are times where you have to, where you need to stand your ground and say, you know what, I'm going to do this and this and this because I believe that that's right, and that's your right, and and I strongly encourage that. But you have that understanding that comes with consequences, and I'm willing to suffer those consequences if that's the case. And if we had more people thinking like that, I think a lot of these issues would be non-existent, or at least mitigated heavily. There wouldn't be as much need for policing as there would be now. People would be able to handle these issues on their own and kind of judge for themselves. Is this a fight that I want to pick? Is this a fight worth picking? And they'd be smart enough to make that decision on their own. That's ultimately what I think is the caveat to all of this. Like, yes, there's problems here. Yes, there's problems here. But I believe the caveat to that is that all that can be mitigated just by using common sense and thinking for yourself, thinking logically for yourself. And ultimately that's kind of where I wanted to end up on this. Although we don't have a clear answer whether we should or shouldn't, we kind of have some possible solutions, but ultimately the understanding that we are ultimately responsible for our own safety, right? Kind of goes back to what we talked about back in episode 14, right? Go out, get trained, get educated, learn about these things, right? Don't be afraid to ask stupid questions. Learn about these things. Start taking responsibility for not responsibility, but start taking an interest in protecting yourself. Start taking an interest in doing things that are going to put you responsible, put your ego responsible, if that makes sense. Basically, don't be afraid to be wrong about something and learn from it, right? You're trying to learn about certain aspects about law. You're trying to learn about certain aspects on society. Don't be afraid to ask that stupid question. Be like, hey, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that. Tell me if I'm right, tell me if I'm wrong, and I can learn from that, right? A lot of us are very susceptible to the luxury of having the internet, having the world basically at the palm of your hands, at your fingertips, that you can just say, I don't really need to know about this stuff because someone else can do it for me, right? I think if we get back to the basics of being responsible for ourselves, I think that would help out society a lot. What do you guys think about that? I don't want to go too much into this and turn it, because it'll start turning into a rant, and I don't want to be putting up too many videos and things like that. Then we start running into possible copyright stuff, and all this should be fair use. This is unbelievably transformative. Like, I just used a 2-minute snippet, but you never know. What do you guys think about everything that's going on? I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think it's an appropriate reaction to what is happening in reference to like the Freedom Convoy and everything like that in Canada. I would definitely be in support of something like that happening in the United States, but it's a little bit different, right? We have states that are willing to put their foot down and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do things the way we've always done them because we think we're right, and that's the end of that. But that leads into another discussion, because ultimately federal law supersedes state law. So it's one of those things where it's very difficult, because a lot of our states are not united. So it's very difficult to have a freedom convoy like in Canada, because to my understanding, I don't think they have a setup like the way that we do, right? Like in Canada, everything is just broad, to my understanding. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't care. But they have a broad enforcement of their laws, right? There are not really nuances in different locations versus in the United States. Like the easiest example I can think of, in California, you have restrictions on magazines for firearms, right? You can't have a firearm that has more than 10 rounds or something like that. So you cannot purchase a magazine that has more than 10 rounds when you live in California. But if you live in Texas or Florida and other not so restrictive states, it doesn't matter. You can buy 30-round magazines. It doesn't really matter. You can carry as many rounds in your magazines as you can fit in a magazine, right? That there's available for it. There's no restrictions like that. So in the United States, we're not as tied together as they are in Canada, right? Because we have such a large country. We have so many different people who think different ways because they have the luxury of thinking that way. They're able to live in the comfort of their home and have personal security and have just the ability to be ignorant about certain things, and that's just how it is. So I think it'd be really, really cool to have a freedom convoy like that, just for people to do things like that peacefully, unlike that Black Lives Matter junk in the summer of 2020 and all those riots and everything like that. That was not peaceful. That is not going to change anybody's mind. It's just going to encourage people to, put up bigger walls, whether they're mental walls or actual physical walls, and create that divide. And it just is what it is. So again, guys, really want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch these videos. We're not too big or anything like that, so any growth that we have, it's mainly from you guys. We are on Gab. I probably need to change this and our little header here and put a little something for Gab, that it shows Gab on there. So just so that you guys can see that we are on Gab. Where are we? Right here. My setup is a little bit different today, so I'm not clicking correctly in the places I'm supposed to. So we're on Gab right here. So if you guys go to @SlamFireMedia, you guys can hit us up on Gab. Again, we're not. I've done a few. I know I talked about this before, that we don't do any sort of networking. We started doing it. I started networking maybe about 2 episodes ago. So I just post up our episodes, to check it out. But don't worry, guys. It's nothing crazy. We have no followers or anything like that. So we're still very much grassroots, and I'm not out there posting in every single group or every single forum and trying to get as big as possible. Any growth that we have is still mainly going to be from you guys. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch our videos and share our content, because I know you guys have been sharing it, because our videos have been consistent and you guys have been consistently watching it. So I really appreciate that. You guys take it easy. Thank you for watching Slamfire. Check us out on slamfiremedia.com. We have links to YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. This has been Slamfire. Take it easy.